Right, but in this case of bankruptcy of Greece, let's say, the ECB wouldn't step in to print money again, yeah, like trillions of euros, just to pay out the derivative markets. What do you think?
Well, I hope that the ECB would not step in. That's why I say that if they let Greece go bankrupt, people would know that the Europe is now going to have a sound currency. That they're not going to let people just get away with spending money they don't have and borrowing gigantic amounts of money. So it would be very, very good for the euro if it happened. I don't think it's going to happen this way, but it would certainly send a message to the world and to European politicians and world politicians that they have to run sound economies and they can't spend money they don't have. So it would be a good move for the euro and for Europe and the world if they did it, at least in my view.
Right. So, but the European politicians seem to do everything they can to prevent a Eurozone member state declaring bankruptcy. Uh, Look, in my opinion, that's not capitalism. I call that some sort of socialism, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is certainly socialism or welfare for the rich. It's not. It's welfare for politicians. Is what it is. Uh, again, it's not good because then the Greeks or whoever will just and not just the Greeks, all politicians in Europe and the world will then continue to spend money they don't have, which is going to be bad for the citizens, the poor voters, the poor taxpayers. They're all going to suffer in the long run. While the politicians, if they can get through this crisis, then they can keep their jobs and everything is okay. And when the real problems and the real collapse comes, then most politicians think that they will be gone. By the way, you have countries have been going bankrupt all the time for decades. There's nothing new about this. If Greece goes bankrupt, it wouldn't be the first country or the last.
Right. I mean, we have suffered from this in Germany as well, I think, in history. So that's exactly what you say. It's nothing new. But a lot of people are very afraid about this, even when it comes to the idea to let a country go bankrupt, cheating
It's been
around.
happening. It's been happening for centuries. You've been having banks go bankrupt, insurance companies go bankrupt, countries go bankrupt, and somehow the world survives. Some people make money, some people lose money when you have huge changes, but that's the way the world has always worked.
Right. So now politicians they're talking about this idea of creating a so-called European monetary fund. So countries don't bail out banks anymore, but other countries now. I mean, isn't that absurd?
It's just more of the same thing. You're papering over the problems. You're pushing the problems out into the future. You're not solving the problems. You cannot continue to spend huge amounts of money that you don't have and run up gigantic debts. Eventually, somebody has to pay the piper, and eventually, the house of cards collapses. So yeah, I mean it's absurd to continue. What they'll do is they'll paper it over. They'll come up with a European bank of some kind, make everything look okay, but your children, your grandchildren, and maybe even you will be facing serious problems down the road.
Yeah, of course. I think so. So what they're doing now, they're blaming the speculators. Yeah, the speculators. They're talking about hedge funds and so on. Yeah, to be the bad boys in this game. They're shorting the euro currency and those things.
But speculators, the people who ran up these huge debts, are the Greeks themselves and the Greek politicians. It was not the speculators who ran up these debts.
Right.
Whenever somebody gets into trouble, people sell. It's just the way the world works. If your neighbor is going bankrupt and you know it, you're probably not going to lend him any money or help him out. You've helped him out as much as you can, but then you will finally stop helping. When you have the other side is if somebody discovers oil, speculators as you call them or as the politicians call them, go in and buy those shares. They see an opportunity and so they try to go and take advantage of it. This is the way the world works. The people who are selling in Greece are mainly the Greeks and the Europeans because they see that there's a serious problem. That, of course, eventually investors and speculators come along, they see an opportunity, and they invest. But
let's
by the way, when Greece joined the common market, the EU, lots of quote speculators went in, bought your Greek bonds, bought Greek stocks, bought property in Greece because they saw good things happening. Then the Greeks, of course, turned it into a disaster by making many mistakes, and so now a lot of people are selling. I didn't hear the Greeks complaining when people were putting money into Greece because they thought it was getting better. I only hear them complaining when they've made a mistake, and then people start selling.
Yeah, right. I mean, let's come back to this press article about Soros, I think, and other hedge fund managers saying that they have gathered to bring down the euro currency. Is that fake news, or would those people tell mainstream media to start shorting the euro to crash it, or do you believe in this?
Well, you have to ask him. As I said, I own the euro. I'm long the euro. I know there's a lot of skeptics on the euro. I know a lot of people are short the euro, so you'll have to ask them. I happen to own the euro because I think they're going to paper this over for a while, and things are going to be okay for a while. As I said before, I think it's bad for the euro in the long term, but at the moment they're going to paper it over. So I own the euro.
Okay,
What
so
other people are doing, I have no idea.
okay, question of personal interest. Mr. Juncker, yeah, the Luxembourg finance minister, I think, said, okay, that we have instruments of torture, he called it. What does he mean by telling the so-called speculators to torture them?
Normally, politicians and governments can do whatever they want. They can change the rules, and they have throughout history. They change the rules, and if they see a way to make people they don't like suffer, they do it. Is it fair? No, of course it's not fair to change the rules in the middle of a game. But politicians don't. Nobody ever said any politicians were fair. I have no idea what they can do, but I do know that throughout history, politicians have been able to change rules, and they have, and they can cause problems.
Right. The Eurozone and the European Union, I think they are seen as a political project, yeah, and the politicians, they want to fight for it. Don't you think that a currency, yeah, like the euro, is adding even more to the economic problems of the whole region at the end of the day, especially in the so-called PIGS countries?
In my view, the euro is a wonderful concept. The world needs something to replace the U.S. dollar or compete with the U.S. dollar. The euro, on paper, is fabulous. It's a united currency. It would make, the European Union is a large has a large population, a large economy, so it would be a very liquid currency if it were done properly. And the European Union as a whole doesn't have a lot of debt. They don't have a big trade deficit like the U.S. does. So in theory, the euro would be good. Now, unfortunately, the practice has not been so good for the euro, and many of the countries you mentioned, the PIGS countries, have not been playing by the rules. They have been running up debts rather than trying to maintain a sound currency. The Maastricht Treaty called for sound currencies, that everybody would keep their deficit down, that they would run a reliable economy. Well, most of those countries have not. They thought there would be a free lunch. The politicians have been spending money they didn't have. They've been borrowing huge amounts of money, and now they're going to have to pay the price. So the execution of the euro is turning out to be not so good because of many politicians who didn't want to play by the rules. I think if I had been doing the euro, and I certainly said this at the time, if I were Germany, I would have taken in, the Netherlands, Austria, maybe Finland, 2 or 3 other countries that were sound countries, had a small euro, and expanded it gradually as countries really, were clear that they would play by the rules. Unfortunately, that's not the way it worked, and now you have a lot of people who have not run sound currencies, and it's going to affect the whole euro, or all of Europe.
I think so. I agree with you.